Hello guys, my name is Remik, and in today's very long video that you actually need the cup of coffee to complete this video at once, we'll create the .NET 8 Web API together with FluentValidation, CQRS pattern, mapping with Mapster, and also the global exception handling that will have the approach of the .NET 8. And also the React together with TypeScript side will display the list of movies, we'll create those movies, we'll update them, and also we'll be able to delete them. And it will be the full complete web application. So if you like this video, then please hit the subscribe button, like button, and now we are going straight into the demo section that I will show you what we'll actually build. Alright guys, so as I have said, we have the list of the movies displayed in the table. In our React frontend application, we have the title, description, created date, category, and also actions that we can perform on the certain movie. We can edit the movie, we can delete the certain movie, and also create new one. I can just create the new one, so it will be the movie 4, desk 4, and also category 4. So we are now we were navigated to the create movie form that is actually the same form that we are using also for editing the certain movie. We can submit, and now as you see, we have created the new movie, and this movie is in our database. So this is the call to the API by the Swagger. We can just see that we have 4 methods, so we can get all the movies, get only certain one that is used, for instance, right now. So we are getting the movie with the ID of 17. We can edit this movie with the ID of 17 and also delete. So as you see, we can just simulate the error. I have the validation that category cannot be longer than 30 characters. So I'll just inspect. So I'll just inspect my page. So in the console, when we submit, as you see, we have the 400 bad request from our API movies/17 from the put request. And as you see, we have the axios error, and inside we have the property category, and also the category cannot be longer than 30 characters, so it's coming from our API by the axios interceptor. So we'll create the also interceptor for all the errors that we'll get potentially from our API. And we can delete the certain movie, and this is refreshed view. So as you see, everything here is displayed correctly after delete statement as well. Alright, so we'll start with the creation of the new .NET 8 Web API project. So I'll just create the project name. It will be the movies.presentation. The solution name will be just movies. The project name I have to change. It will be movies presentation. Solution directory I'll just assign to apps. Create Git repository, Web API, and we'll just hit create. Alright, as you see, we have already the presentation, so our Web API itself. So we'll just remove everything that is not needed. As you see, we have some sort of the basic weather forecast method that for sure is well known for you. So we'll just remove those summaries, and also this endpoint that is from the minimal API. We'll just remove this, the forecast of the weather from the Microsoft, this as well. Well, those comments. Alright guys, so we would like to create now many different projects just to have our .NET web application to be separated, to be independent, to not depend on the certain classes, but on the abstractions that we can then reuse and change to something else that we'll need in the future. So we'll need the couple different projects. So it will be the infrastructure, domain, contracts, and also the application projects. So I will just quickly create those projects. So just add new project. It will be the class library, and we'll call this movies.application. In this movies.application, we'll have all the CQRS classes. So it will be the queries to our database and also the commands to our database. Also the mappings and also the validators from the FluentValidation. So this is important to have this layer created in your solution. We'll create another one. So it will be the infrastructure. So everything that is needed for our entity framework core to be properly configured. So the migrations, the snapshot as well of our DbContext and DbContext as well. So it will be the movies.in infrastructure. We'll delete this sample class. We'll create as well the movies.domain. So everything that is based on our domain, so related movie entities. So we'll create this here. So we'll keep our database entities. And also the last one will be the movies.contracts. In this project, actually, we'll keep all the responses, the requests that our React application will send and will just get from our API. And as well, we'll keep here the exceptions that will be handled by our global exception middleware. So I'll remove as well the first class, and we'll be ready to go. Alright guys, now we are going to set up the connection to our SQLite database, because in this video we are going to use the SQLite as the database provider, and we'll use the entity framework core to connect with this database. So we need a couple of nuggets to install it in our presentation and in our infrastructure project. So we'll just start with the manage NuGet packages, and we'll install following NuGet packages. So entity framework core. So this first one we have to install. We have to install as well the entity framework SQLite related NuGet package. So it will be this one. And also the entity framework design NuGet package. So install in the movies.presentation project. And we have to install as well the design in our infrastructure project, where we'll store our DbContext. So we'll install this one as well here. We need entity framework core, the normal one. We're going to use also the tools. So entity framework core.tools. And also the relational. So entity framework.relational NuGet package. So I'll install this as well. Infrastructure, and we'll be done with NuGet installation. So we need to create our first class. So it will be the MovieDbContext. and we have to inherit from the DbContext class from Entity Framework Core. So do this like that. Now we have to create the constructor for the movies DbContext, and we'll have to pass the DbContext options called as options, and call the base constructor and pass those options there. And now we have to declare the DB sets, so the tables that we'll have to create in our database. So we have to get some certain entities for DbContext to create those tables. So in our domain project, we have to create a directory called entities. And in this directory, we'll create the first class that will be abstract one, so the base entity will be that kind of the class, and we'll create the public int id get set, and also the public datetime create date. And we'll create the movie.cs file finally, and we'll inherit from the base entity. So this base entity actually can be accessed by many other entities that we can create here if we'll just enrich our API with another models. So we can just inherit from this, and we'll not have to declare once again the ID of the entity and also the create date. So we'll just have everything in this base entity. And for the movie itself, we'll have the public string title, public string description, and also we'll have the public string category. And we can go back to our DbContext, and we can just declare public db set of the movie. And movie, we have to reference the project of the domain, of course, yes, and we'll call this movies. So it will be the name of the table that will be created by the Entity Framework Core. Okay, now we can go to our Program.cs in our movies.presentation in our web API, and we can set up the Entity Framework Core together with the SQLite. So we'll just write builder.services.add DbContext, and we'll have to pass here the movies DbContext, and of course to add the reference to it from our web API. So it will be the movies.infrastructure reference, and we'll pass here the options. And we'll just write opt.use SQLite, and we have to pass the DB connection string that we'll set just in a moment. So the builder configuration dot get connection string. So in that case, we'll get the specific section of the connection strings from our Appsettings.json configuration file, and the name will be DbConnection string, like that. And we have to go to our Appsettings.json file, add the specific section called connection strings. And now it will be the DbConnection string, DbConnection string, and it will be called data source. It will be equal to movies.db. So it will be the file of our SQLite database. And now we are ready to create our first migration. So in order to create the migration, to create for us the database with this movie entity and to create the table called movies, we have to pass two commands in our command line. So we'll just write here .NET EF migrations add, and here we'll have the name, so it will be init, so the initial one. We have to specify with the flag of S the place where we have our web API, so it will be the movies.presentation, and with the flag of P we have to pass the place where we have our MovieDbContext, so it will be the movies.infrastructure. Build started. And succeeded. As you see, we have the migrations folder that was created for us. So we have this init file. So as you see, this is the create table statement for our database just to be created. So we have this ID, title, description, category, and the create date. And we have the primary key for the ID, as it always is being done by the database agents, just to have the primary key as the ID. And here we have also the down methods just to drop this table, so just to undo this specific migration. Here we have also the DbContext snapshot. So we'll have everything over there, what actually our DbContext representation is. So we have this init file and model snapshot, and now just to apply this migration, we have to pass another command. So it will be the as well .NET EF database, a database update. We have to pass as well with the flag S where we have our web API, so it will be the movies.presentation, and with the flag P it will be the movies.infrastructure where we have our DbContext. As you see, build started. I haven't written this properly, so database update once again. And as you see, the create table movie statement was performed correctly, and actually it executed in our database, and we have this movies.db here. I can just connect to it, and as you see, we have the movies database with the 4 tables: migration history, SQLite master sequence, and also the movies. And as you see, we have nothing there, but we have all of these 5 properties in our movies table already. Now we can talk about CQRS pattern and how to set up this in our project. So CQRS pattern that is used with the mediator. So this is the way of handling the request and the responses with the only one centralized point. So the dependencies, they don't know about each other. It's only the one point to handle the request. So just to briefly show you, so we have the request caller. This request goes to the mediator, 1 point. This mediator only knows, so it's like the secretary in the company. She only knows where to pass my request to which person. Then it goes to the handler. And this handle then passes the request to the database with the usage of the DbContext that we have just set up. And then it goes to the DB, and then we have the response back to the request caller. So this is the mediator part, and also we'll just separate, so the CQRS will just separate the commands with the queries. So the command, so this is everything that we write to the database. So we create, we update, and also we delete some sort of entities, and the queries, so just get movie by ID or get all of the movies. So it will be completely separated. So now we'll have to install the specific mediator NuGet packages. So in the presentation, we'll have the mediator NuGet package we can use. We'll just install in the presentation part, and in the application where all our handlers, our commands, queries will be stored at, we'll have to as well install the same NuGet package together with the NuGet package called contracts. Alright, now we can create two directories in our application project. So it will be the first one called commands, that I have just explained to you what is this all about, and also the queries. And now we'll create full directories called movies and also the movies, because we can extend this project just to not only handle the movies, but as well something else. So we'll just create two directories called movies. And now the first one will be create movie, update movie, and also to delete movie. And in query section, we'll have the get movies and also get movie by ID that will be used by our movie form in the React. Get movie by ID. And now we'll just create the specific query for getting the movies. So we have to create the get movies query, and it will be the type of the record. Public record get movies query, and have to inherit from the I request from the mediator NuGet, and here we have to return some kind of the response. So in that case, I'll just return the get movies response. But we don't have this get movies response created yet. So we have to go to this contracts project, and we'll add one directory called responses. And also, just for the future requests, and the responses, it will be the get movies response, will be the as well type of the record, so it will be immutable, and it will be the list of movie DTO that we have just to create movie DTOs. So it will be the representation of our movie entity. So we'll just create another directory called DTOs, and it will be called movie DTO.cs. And as you remember, we had the integer ID, we had the string title, string description, date time, create date, and also the string category. This is the representation of our movie entity from our database. So now we can reference the project of the contracts, and in Get Movies we'll have also to fetch this movie DTO from the contracts itself. And now we have our first query. So we can create as well the handler just to handle this get request to retrieve all the movies from our database. So it will be the get movies query handler we inherit from I request handler. As you see, so we have to pass the request, so it will be the get movies query, and we'll return the get movies response. We'll just implement missing members. As you see, we have the handle method. So we have to create the constructor for it and use our DbContext here. So movies DbContext. Reference project of the infrastructure, movies DbContext. We'll introduce the read-only field. Now we can retrieve all the movies from our database, so it will be await movies DbContext dot movies dot to list async, and we'll pass the cancellation token just in case here. And as you see, we have the list of movies. So we don't have even the list of the movie DTO, but we have the list of movie. We would like just to have this wrapped into the get movies response that will be then retrieved from our React request caller. So we can do this manually here, just to have multiple lines, or we can set up at once the Mapster and the mapping configuration and have this done in only one line. So we'll just go and manage NuGet packages in our application project, and we'll add the two Mapster NuGet packages. So it will be the first one. So the normal Mapster, and also we'll install not the pre-release but normal version of the Mapster.DependencyInjection. We'll install two of them here, and we'll create separated directory called mappings, and we'll create the mappingConfig.cs. Okay, and now we have to create the public static void configure method. And now we have to map from the movie up to the get movies response, and also the movie to get movie by ID response at once. So we'll just write the type adapter config, and we'll pass the, as you remember, list of movie, and it has to be mapped to the get movies response. So we'll just type new config, and then we have to map the test to the destination will be the movie DTOs from the source called source. So the destination of the movie DTOs will be the same as you have here in the movie. So it will be mapped properly to the get movies response. Now we can create the DependencyInjection.cs class where we can configure our Mapster and also the mediator. So DependencyInjection. DependencyInjection.cs. It will be the static class. And it will be the public static iService collection, and it will be called addApplication. And this is the extension method. So this iService collection services and now we have to add our mapping config. So mappingConfig.configure, then var config, it will be the type adapter config.global settings. Then we have to configure the scan, so it will be the scan method with the from this assembly, so from this project, and then services at singleton our config for the mapping. So it will be this. We have to return, of course, the services, and also we can set up the essential mediator method. So it will be the services at mediator configuration, and we can just type register services from assembly. So from this project, get executing assembly. So as you see, it will just register various handlers from this assembly. So each handler that we can here configure in our application project. So now we are back in our handle method of the GetMovieByQueryHandler class, and now, as you see, we can just return movies.adapt and it will be the GetMovies response, and we'll be safe. We'll have the GetMovies response properly mapped in that case. As you see, this add application is not used anywhere, so we have to go to the Program.cs and write following statement. So the builder services add application. So we have to reference the project of the movies.application, and now we see that it will be registered properly. So the mediator of the all handlers, and also the mapping config of the Mapster. Now, as we have our GetMovies query and QueryHandler properly written, so now we can go to the GetMovieById and do the same for it. So we'll just write GetMovieById query. Yes, and it will be the record. So we'll just write here int id, because we'll pass the specific ID of the movie just to get this resource from the database, and we'll have to inherit from, as before, from the iRequest. And now, once again, GetMovieById response. So we haven't created it yet, so we have to go to our contracts project and create the response as this. So it will be GetMovieById response.cs. It's the record, and it will be the MovieDTO. We can just port this, and we'll just create the handler for it. So it will be the GetMovieById query for handler, And as before, inherit from iRequest handler. The first one is the request. So the query in that case, get movie by ID query, and the response will be get movie by ID response. Implement missing members. Of course, it will be the asynchronous. So async. And as before, we can just copy from another handler. So it will be this one. And add the DbContext. And now we have to write var movie. It will be the await movies DbContext movies first or default async, and it will be the ID will be equal to request.id and the cancellation token. And now if movie is null, then throw new exception. Then we will handle the exception in the later phase of this video. If not, just return movie.adapt from Mapster, and it will be get movie by ID response. And we have to go to our mapping config and also configure the mapping config for it. So it will be the type adapter config from movie to get movie by ID response. So as before, new config and map destination.movie.to, and it will be from the source. Now, once we have created all of the queries, we can start with the commands. So we can start with the create movie. So we can write create movie command. CS, it will be a record. And as you remember, we have to pass the title of the movie, we have to pass the description, and also the category. And we have to inherit from the iRequest, and we'll return the int. So it will be the created ID of the movie. And now we'll create a handler, so it will be create movie command handler.cs, and we'll inherit from iRequest handler, we'll pass the create movie command, and we'll return the integer. So we have to implement this method, and of course, as before, movies DbContext as the parameter, movies DbContext, and we'll create the read-only field. And now we have to create the new movie. So from this request, we are fetching all the title, category, and description. Now we are performing the movie DbContext dot movies dot add async this movie that we have just created. We can pass the cancellation token, and then we can get this ID. So it will be await movies DbContext save changes async, and we'll have the ID, and we'll return this ID from this method. We'll assign this to createDate equals datetime now to universal time. As you see, when you're retrieving the ID based on the save changes async result, it will just return for us the number of rows affected. If we would like to return the specific ID after the save changes async, we can just access this movie.id and it will be assigned automatically. So we'll just change this and we'll return the movie.id after the save changes method. Now we can deal with the update movie. So create update movie command for it, a new record, and yeah, we'll pass the ID, string title, string description, string category, and we'll inherit from request and will return nothing. So the mediator, we have to return the unit type. So as you see, this is represents the void type. We'll create update movie command handler. Yes, as before, request handler, pass the update movie command and we'll return the unit. Out of that, we have to create constructor movies DbContext context, create read only field and assign the async keyword. And now we have to retrieve this movie based on the ID to check if actually this movie exists in our database or not. If not, then we have to throw an exception. So movie2 update is equal to await movies DbContext movies first or default async, where ID is equal to request.id and cancellation token. If this movie2update will be null, then throw new exception that will handle later on with the global exception handling. And if not, then this movie2update description will be the same as the request.description, and so on and so forth. So movie2update.title will be the same as the request title, and movieUpdate.category as well will be the same as the request content that we have here. Then we have to pass the movies DbContext movies update, and it will be the movie2update, and then of course await movies DbContext save changes async with the cancellation token, and we will return the unit.value. And now the last command will be the delete movie command. So delete movie command.cs as record, and we have to pass the ID and inherit from the request and return the unit. We'll create as well the command for it, the command handler. So it will be delete movie command handler, and the same as before, we are passing the command and what we are returning. Don't forget about the async keyword, and also to pass the context, so movie DbContext context. And now, as before, in the update movie command handler that we have been retrieving the first or default movie based on the ID, we can copy that and only just to rename this variable as the movie to delete. So we have to retrieve the movie that we would like to delete based on the ID. If this movie to delete is null, then we'll just throw new exception out from that. If not, then movies.DbContext, movies.remove, and we are passing this movie to delete. Then we are writing the await movies DbContext, save changes async to perform this operation in our database, and we are returning unit.value. Now, once we have created everything related to our CQRS pattern, we can set up our endpoints to actually use all of those handlers and perform the operations on the database. So in the presentation project, we'll create the directory called modules, and I'll call this movies module CS. It will be the static class because we'll create the extension method. So it will be the public static void at movies endpoints. So we will extend the endpoint root builder and we'll create the first endpoint, so it will be app.mapGet. Here we'll have the prefix, so the API/piece. And now we have to pass that it will be the async, and in the parentheses, alright, MediatR and then cancellation token. And now we have to return the movies, so it will be movies equals to await mediator.send, and we are creating the new movie GetMovieByQuery. Then we are passing also the cancellation token to it, and as you see, we'll have the getMovies response. So we are just returning the results.ok, and we are passing those movies that we have retrieved from our database. And then we have to write with tags just to have the special section in our Swagger as the movies. We can create another get endpoint, so it will be the mapGet API/piece and the curly brackets the ID. Then it will be the same, so I will just copy that with tags movies, and here just write for movie await mediator send new get movie by ID query, and we need also the ID for it. So we'll pass the ID, and this ID from the request itself here. And then return results.OK, and this movie that is actually the GetMovieByID response, but this is the MovieDTO itself. The next endpoint will be to create the movie, so map post. We'll have the /API movies, and then async mediator, and then we need to have the request. So we need to create the create movie request. Create movie request, create movie request. Just do it in a minute with tags movies. We need to create this request in the contracts. So it will be directory called movies, and it will be the create movie request. And it will be the record create movie request with the title, description, and the category. We can just create in the same time the update movie request.cs. And this request will look like that. So we need to pass the ID, title, description, and the category. Useful for the next endpoint we'll create. Right, now we have to create the command. So it will be new create movie command, and we'll pass the create movie request title, create movie request description, and then create movie request category to it. And now, as before, var result, and it will be the await mediator dot send, and we are passing this command and also the cancellation token that we haven't declared here. So cancellation token that also there we haven't passed the cancellation token. I'll just fix it now, and we are returning results okay with this result. Now we're ready to create also the put method, so it will be map put for our update of the movie. So API movies /ID, as we had with the get by ID request, will be the async mediator, then ID, then it will be the update movie request, and also the cancellation token. Write the with tags, and it will be the movies as before, and we'll do the one modification in our update movie request just to remove that ID because we'll fetch this from our URL. And now it will be exactly the same as we have in the post, but it will be the update movie command. We'll just change name for the update movie request. As we see, we have also the ID, so we'll pass the ID. And do we have everything correctly done? So we have the title, description, and then category, title, description, category, and also the ID. Okay, guys, and now as the last endpoint, it will be the map delete. So we are passing API, movies, and the specific ID. And then async. And we'll pass the mediator as before. Mediator. Then it will be the int ID. And also the cancellation token. We'll add with tags. Be compliant with all the endpoints. And now we'll create the command as delete movie command. It will pass the ID. And then it will be the same as for all of the commands. So result, return OK on the result. Now we have to use the method in our Program.cs file. So it will be app.addMoviesEndpoints. And we are ready to go. We can finally run our web API and check how our endpoints will look like. So we have 5 of them. We have the get, so it will return for us the get movies response with the movie DTOs. We have the post, so we'll just try with the title movie 1, desk 1, and also category 1. As we see, we have the 1 as the response, so probably we'll have the movie DTO returned from our database. We can also delete the first one because it was invalid. We will pass the ID 1, the empty response body, and here we have only the ID of 2. And we can also try to get the second one. So we have the movie DTO. If we'll execute with the first one, it will be not found. So the exception that we can handle in the later phase of this video. And also we'll pass the ID of 2. And we'll change this to, let's say, W's. And it was changed properly. Now there's the time to finally set up our validators, so we'll use the FluentValidation in order to check what we have in our request, and if it will not satisfy our requirements that we will set in our validator rules, then we'll return the 400 bad request response. So the first thing to do is to, of course, install the essential NuGet package, so it will be the FluentValidation.DependencyInjection extensions. I'll install this in our movies.application where we have our our commands and our queries. And we'll start with the create movie command handler. So create movie command validator. So we'll check if we'll proceed further to our command handler or not. We have to inherit from the abstract validator and we'll pass the command. Next thing to do is to create the constructor, and now we are using the rule for method, and we can start that the category, for instance, has to be not empty. So if it will be empty in the create movie command, then we'll return the 400 response with the message, name of movie dot category cannot be empty with the maximum length of 30 characters, and also we have with the message that name of movie dot category cannot be longer than 30 characters. The next rule will be for the description and also for the title, so we can copy the content of it and we'll change this accordingly. So we have the category, so we'll change this for the description and also for the movie title. So we'll change this, that description and also the title, they cannot be empty, and the title cannot be longer than, let's say, 100 characters, and description then 1000 characters. So it will be 1000 and 100. And we have to do this for all of the commands that we have here. So we can just proceed with the delete movie command validator. Movie command validator will inherit from the abstract validator, will pass the delete movie command. And in the constructor itself, we'll set one rule that the ID is not empty, and with the message that name of movie.id cannot be empty and now we'll create as well the update movie command validator, and it will be absolutely the same as we have for the create movie command. So it will be the update movie command. We'll create the constructor for it, and since we have all the same rules, we can just copy that and also we have to create one additional rule that the ID is not empty and with message from the delete movie command validator. We'll just copy and paste it. That movie ID from this movie command cannot be empty as well in order to update the movie that we have in our database. Now the last validator that we'll create is for the GetMovieByID query. And it will be the simple one, so GetMovieByID query validator CS, and it will be the same as we have the rule for the delete movie command, because we're requesting the movie by specific ID, so it cannot be empty as well. So abstract validator get movie by ID query. I'll create the constructor for it, and I'll just copy paste what we have in our deletion of the movie. And now we have to set up the dependency injection to register all the validators itself. So we'll write in our dependency injection add application method, we'll just write services.add validators from assembly.get executing assembly. Now, in order to use those validators, we have to create one centralized point of handling the validation errors. So we'll create something called validation behavior. So it will be set up to our pipeline that MediatR actually handles the requests. So we'll have to create the directory called behaviors. And the class will be called validation behavior. And we have to specify that it will be the T request and T response. And we have to inherit from I pipeline behavior. And we have to pass T request, T response as well. And we're implementing missing members. And we have to write that will inject all of the validators for the specific T requests. So it will be the private read-only I enumerable from the I validator, from the fluent validation, and also the T request as the type. We'll call them validators, create the constructor, and it will assign those validators here. And now we are going to create the context, and it will be called new validation context. Context of the type T request. So it will be generic based on the request that is going through our validation behavior pipeline behavior. And now we can just write validation failures are equal to await task when all validators dot select, and we'll use the, it's not visible at all, we'll use the validate async method based on the context, and also we'll pass the cancellation token there. So as you see, here we will use all the validators, and based on that, we'll validate and get the validation result. So we have the validation failures there. And now we can get those validation failures and we can filter them, and we'll check for all of them that are not valid. So those validation results that are not valid at all. And we are selecting many of those. And we'll get the errors of those. It will not be actually the validation failures, but validation results. And from those validation results that are not valid, we're selecting the errors. And then we'll just select the specific failure and we'll create new validation error. And this validation error will actually create in the contracts. So I'll create one directory called errors, and it will be the validation error.cs, and it will be the string property and also string. It could be error message. We'll go back there and we'll assign that the property will be the property name, and also the error message will be the error message itself. And then we'll use the toList to create the list of those validation errors. And then if we have any of those, then we'll throw new validation exception. We'll call this custom validation exception. And then we'll pass those failures there, but we have to create this custom validation exception. So we'll create another directory called exceptions. And we'll create custom validation exception .cs. We'll inherit from the exception. Will be the public list of the validation error. Validation errors. List of validation error. And validation errors will be what will pass in the constructor. And if everything went fine, then we have the proper validation performed, and we can just write response is the await next, and then return this response And next will be the request handler delegate based on the response. Now the last thing to do is to register our behavior. So it will be in the add application method, in the add mediator, we have to add one line called add open behavior, and it will be type of validation behavior, and it will be generic, so we are passing here the comma, and we can go and check in our validation behavior how it will work like to simulate the scenario that will have some failure. I'll run the Swagger. And as you see, we'll use the post method to create the movie, but everything will be actually empty. As you see, we have the one validation result that the category cannot be empty, description, and the title cannot be empty. So we have 3 of those errors. And then we are throwing the custom validation exception with this validation error. You have the error message and also the property of the movie. And when we will go back, we have the 500 internal server error, and we have the exception of the custom validation exception type that it was actually thrown. So this is the one centralized point of handling all the validation errors that will occur. As you remember, also we were using the general exception in case of any null that was returned from database based on the ID. For instance, here in the GetMovieByID query handler, so we can create our custom NotFoundException in our exceptions directory in the contracts project. So it will be the NotFoundException, and we will change this to be more precise. We'll pass string message and inherit from the exception and pass the message there. And in case of any null, we'll just reuse this exception. We have to pass also the message. So in my case, it will be name of movie with ID, so also with movie.id, with ID request.id was not found in database. And we have to go as well to the delete movie handler. And also to the update movie handler. The create movie, we are not checking if we have the resource in database or not. All right, and now we're ready to create the exception handler with the .NET 8 approach. So one centralized point of the exception handling. So if we have the not found exception or any type of exception, or also the validation exception, we have to, based on this exception type, return the proper status code and also the response to the caller in case of any failure. So we'll create another directory called handlers in our presentation project. And we'll create the exception handler. Program.cs. Have to inherit from ExceptionHandler or implement the missing members. Have to pass the async keyword. And yeah, we'll start with the creation of the problem details. So we'll create one private static problem details. Create problem details method based on the exception that will come to our handler. And yes, now we have to write problem details equals exception switch. And yeah, if it will be not found exception, so our exception that we were discussing the moment ago, so then we have to create problem details but it will be another method. So private static problem details, create problem details, and we'll pass the status, the integer, string title, and also string detail. And it will be the factory method, so we're creating the return new problem details. And we'll return the status as the status, integer, title as the title, and also detail as detail. So we're creating the problem details. And if it was not found exception, then we are passing as the first parameter status codes dot not found. Then the title will be not found. And then exception.message. If it was actually the validation, our custom validation exception, then we are creating problem details with the status code of 400 baud request, validation error, and as the detail will be one or more validation errors occurred. And in case of any other type of exception, we'll create the problem details with the 500. So it will be internal server error, internal server error, and as the detail will be called unexpected error occurred. But wait, we have forgot about the errors that we are passing from our validation behavior here. So we have the validation errors with the property and also the error message. So we have to go there, and in case that the exception that was passed there is the validation exception, then and only then we are appending the extension. So problem details dot extensions as errors. We are passing the custom validation exception dot validation errors, and then we are returning the problem details from it. And now we have to create the problem details. So we are using the create problem details based on the exception type. And now DbContext.response.status code. It will be the problem details dot status. If we don't have any status, just in case, then we are returning, of course, the 500. So the internal server error 500. Then we have to write as the JSON our problem details. So we will use the HTTP context response write as JSON async method, and we are passing the problem details along with the cancellation token, and we are returning true. And now we have to configure in our Program.cs our exception handler. So we'll write builder dot services dot add exception handler of type exception handler, and we have to write, well, app use exception handler and define it like that. And now we'll check how the responses now look like from our exception handler. We can also use the breakpoint to see what kind of problem details will return in case of any failure. So as before, we can simulate the validation error. As you see, we have the problem details and one or more validations occurred. We have the extensions and we have the errors. Category cannot be empty. Title and description. We have the status 400. And now when we'll resume, as you see, we have a very fancy response from our API in case of bad request. In case of any other exception, it will also have the specific structure of the problem details that we can adjust just in a moment in our React application in case of any failures as well, and properly display them in the console. Now, once we have our backend site created and configured properly, we are ready to start with the React development, so we can create the new React app. But at first you have to make sure that you have the Node.js installed with the version that will be higher than 16. So I recommend just to download the latest one with the long-term support. Now once we have our Node.js installed, we can create in our movies.presentation new directory called client, and we'll create the new React application there. So I'll open the terminal in this directory and we'll write the npm create vite @latest. The project name will be the movies, and we'll use the React and also the TypeScript plus the SWC. So it's the speedy web compiler. It will speed up the build process, for instance. Now we can write cd and go to the movies, and we'll write the npm install just to install all the dependencies. as you see, it's done. We have our movies React application created. Now we can type npm run dev to see how our template looks like. As you see, this is the default vite plus React template. We can increase the number of count by pressing the button. So it works. I'll just switch this off. I'll press terminate, and we have a couple things to do. Just to start with our React development, we have to remove a couple of those template files because all of them will not be needed. We'll remove this vite logo. Also, we have this react.svg file as well. We can remove it. We can go to the index.html and we'll change the title to movies app. And in the app.tsx, we can just remove all the content that we have here because it will not be needed at all. Set count hook as well. In app.css as well. This is the basic CSS file from our template. I'll remove it. Now we have to think a bit how our application will look like in terms of the components in React. So components are the small parts that are gathering other smaller parts of the code that we can reuse them later on in the different places of our React application. So in here, as you see, we have the movie table, and this movie table, this is the one big component, and this component has also the parent components. So as you'll probably guess, this is only one component that is shared based on the specific ID that is fetched from the whole list of movies. So we have one component movie table and one component movie table item. So for each item of those, we are using the same component. Then when we click edit, then as you see, we are directed to the specific component, and this component is the same actually as for the create movie. So in our application, we'll have three main components. So the table, movie table item, and also the movie form for editing or creating those movies. Now we can start with the directory structure of our React application. So the first thing to do is to create one directory called components. And as we were discussing a moment ago, we'll create the components for the movies. And here we'll create those three components that we'll use in our app. So it will be the movie table.tsx. We'll create another one called movie table item.tsx. And also movie form.tsx. Now we'll write the export default function. This function will be called movie form. And in here we'll just return the empty component. So we'll return that for a while. And we can use the same structure for the movie table and also for the movie table item, but we'll change only the name of the function components. Movie table, also MovieTableItem. Now we need to create another directory called models. And here we'll have the responses from our API and also the model itself that we'll use as the movie DTO. So we can create all of those. So it will be the GetMovieByID response.ts. Another one will be GetMovies response.ts, and also the last one, we'll start with the movie DTO. So we'll write the export interface called movie DTO, and we can go to our movie DTO that we have in our contracts and see what we'll need. We'll need the ID, title, description, create date, and also the category. So we'll start with the ID. It will be the type of the number, or it could be also undefined, because when we'll create another movie that will pass to our API, the API will assign the ID. We will not assign this in our React application. So it could be also undefined. Title will be, of course, the type of string. Then description will be the same type, so string. Create date will be the type of string, but also when we will create it will be undefined. And also the category will be the type of string. Now we can go and create the interface for the GetMovies response. So export interface GetMovies response, and in GetMovies response we'll have the list of the movie DTOs. So we can write movie DTOs, movie DTO as the collection, and we have it. And the last one will be the export interface GetMovieByID response, and we'll have the movie DTO of the type movie DTO. Now we can create another directory. It will be for the routing purposes that will route from our movie table up to the movie form. So it will be called router. But not with the capital letter. And inside we'll create the component called routes.tsx. And it will be empty for a while. We'll create also the directory called interceptors. And we'll create the axios interceptor.ts file. And this axios interceptor will be the purpose of displaying the errors based on the response from our API. It will be also empty for a moment. We'll create now the last directory. It will be called API. And in this directory, we'll have one file called apiConnector. So it will be the one centralized point of performing HTTP requests to our API. And we'll start with this file our React development. So we need to have one npm package installed to perform those HTTP requests, and this package called axios. So we can open our terminal and write npm install axios. And so once we have installed this package, we'll create one configuration file to keep our API URL in the one central point. It will be called config.ts. As you see, our URL for the API is localhost with the port 5028. So we can write a export const API base URL is equal to HTTP localhost 5028, and we'll use this in our API connector. And now once we have our API base URL set up, we can go to the API connector and start with writing our request to our API. So we'll write const API connector equals, and now the first endpoint will be to get all the movies. So we have to declare that it will be the async call, and as the return type, we'll have the movie DTO with promise. We have to import the movie DTO. And now, in the try catch block, the first one will be the try. I will have the const response type axios response of the type get movies response. We have to import axios, and it will be await axios get. We have to import as well the axios, get, and we have to write the URL, so it will be our variable API base URL from the config with the slash movies, and here we'll have the response, and we have to write const movies, and it will be equal to the response. We have to access the data and movie DTOs, and as far as I remember, the return type of the create date will be the full date time, and we would like to display only the year, months, and days, not like the whole date. So we have to map all of those movies and we have to extend each movie. So use all of the properties in the each movie DTO that we have, but for the create date, we have to slice. So we have to substring, let's say, the create date, and we have to take from the index 0 up to 10. So it will only be the date as the year, then month, and day. And if it will be null, then we will return empty string. And we are returning the movies. And then in the catch block, write error for this error, we'll just write console.log error fetching movies, and we'll pass this error there. The next endpoint will be to create the movie. So create movie, we will declare as well that it will be the async call, and we have to pass as the parameter the movie DTO, and as the return type we'll have the void because we'll not return anything. And here as well have the try and catch. Error. And we'll await. We'll use the axios library with the post. It will be the number, what it will return, and we'll pass as well this API base URL with the slash of the movies. But we have to pass the movie to our call, and we'll console.log the error, and we'll throw this error. The next call will be the edit movie, so it will be the same. So async, we are passing the movie with the type of movie DTO to our API, and we are returning nothing from it, so the promise of type void. And it will look very similar to our create movie request, but we're not posting it, but we are using the put. Using the put method, and we have to use the arrow as well there. And now we'll declare the delete movie. So delete movie function, it will be the async call as well. And we are taking as a parameter only the movie ID of the type number, because we would like to delete movie based on the ID, as we have declared this in our API. So as the return type will be the promise of the type void. We are passing the arrow, and we can copy paste it, but it will be the delete, and we are using only the URL there, so we have to write slash with the $sign and take this movie ID that we have in our parameter of that method. And the last endpoint will be the GetMovieById. So as you remember, it will also be the async call as the parameter will take as we have declared in the delete movie method also the movie ID. So movie ID of the type number, and it will return the promise of the type movie DTO or the find. We are passing the arrow. And also in the try catch block, we can write const response. It will be await axios get. And we are taking the same URL. So we are passing the movie ID, but we have the get method, not the delete one. And we can declare, because this is the TypeScript, that will have the GetMovieById response. In that case, so we have to extract from the response, axios response, our movie DTO to return this. So return response dot data dot movie DTO, wrap this into the try catch block. So we use also the catch to catch the error. And we write console.log that error, and also throw that error. And as the last thing, we have to export this API connector. So we'll write export default API connector in order to use this API connector in our components. Now we are almost ready to start with the movie table and with the styling that table and fetching from the API all related movies to display them in that movie table. But at first we have to install one package. It will be the semantic UI, so we'll not use the bootstrap there, but we'll use the semantic UI. So I'll run the terminal and I will write npm install semantic-ui-react @3.0.0 beta.0 semantic-ui-css. After the installation of that package, we have to import one thing in our main.tsx. We have to import semantic-ui CSS semantic.min.css in order to use this in our React app. And as well, at once we can change the import of that index.css file, because we'll not use this at all. We'll use the app.css. So change the import statement to app.css. And at once we can assign the body of our app just to be gray. And for the future, we'll use the margin top for all related container style containers from the semantic UI. And now we can start with our movie table finally. So at first, we would like to import all of the movies into our component from our API. So we'll use the React hook that will set all of the movies based on our API call. So we'll write movies set movies, and it will be use state hook of the type movie DTO, list of movie DTO, and the initial state will be empty. We have to import as well that hook. So we will write import use state from React. Then we'll use the use effect hook. We have to import as well this hook from React. And in here, we'll just write const fetch data will be equal to async call and const fetched movies from our API. We'll await API connector get movies. And then we will set those movies with the usage of our hook to the fetched movies. And then we'll use this. Now, as you see, our movies are not used anywhere. So create our movie table. I will hide this. So at first we have to write container for it from the semantic UI. Add import from semantic-ui-react. And as you remember, in our CSS file, we have created the class name called container style to have that margin top. So we have to declare it here that we'll use that class container style. And now we'll create the table, the normal table with the class name UI in inverted table. And now we have to write that head style will be equal to text align center, just to have everything centered properly. And inside of here, we'll just write the table record. And we'll write that the first record will be the column names. So as you remember, we have the ID. So the first one, I will copy. The title will have description, create date category, and also we'll have the action for the edit and delete. So I will write the proper column names, will be the title, description, create date, category, and also action for the edit and delete will be as the header, and as the body, we'll have the condition that if movies.length is not equal to 0, so we fetched actually something from our API and we have those movies there, then and only then we'll, for each of those movies, we'll create one movie table item. As the key will be the index, and as the movie we'll have the movie, because we have to pass to that component the movie itself. And as you see, we need to pass the movie to our movie table item. So at once we can go to our MovieTableItem, and we have to define the interface. So interface props, it will be the type of MovieDTO. We have to import the MovieDTO, and in here we have to destruct the movie from the props, and we'll use this later on, but just for now we'll not do anything. And under this table, we'll create one button. Be the button from the semantic UI itself. So it will be the button floated right. Floated right of the type button. Content will be to create movie, and it will be the positive. Now we'll fill up the content of that MovieTableItem component. So as you remember, it will be the each row of the specific movie. So we have to create the table row of the class name center aligned, just to be everything in the center, and then td as the specific cell of the data label ID. It will be the movie.id that we passed from our MovieTable component up to this MovieTableItem. And then we'll create everything for the rest of the properties. So it will be the title as the next one, and the movie.title. Then it will be description. Movie.description. Then the create date, movie.createDate, category, and the last one will be the action. But the action will be 2 buttons to edit or to delete the specific movie. So we'll create at first the button. We'll import this from the semantic UI. Will be the color yellow, and also the type of the submit. And as for now, we'll just leave as edit. We will not have any navlink yet because we don't have the routing set up. And the next button will be for the deletion of our movie. So we can write that it will be the type of the button. Negative, just for it to be of the color of red. On click event, and in here you can write async, and then we can use our API connector dot delete movie, and we'll pass the movie.id and it could be the undefined or not, but as we remember, in the movie table, when we don't have any movies fetched from our database, then we'll not display at all this row as the movie table item. So we can normally use that exclamation mark there to not have this kind of error that we are getting from the TypeScript. And then we'll just refresh. And we'll write delete. Now we have to go to our app.tsx component, and we can import our movie table and check how it will look like. So I will just run our API and also run our React app with the usage of npm run dev command. Terminal npm run dev. As you see, we have our table, we have our create movie button, but unfortunately we have an error that the access was blocked by the course policy because we haven't done the course policy yet in our API side. So we have to go to our API and set that from this kind of the URL, so from the localhost 5173, we are accepting the HTTP request. In order to configure our course policy and be able to have our HTTP request accepted by our API, we have to write the following statement: builder.services add course with the options as options.add policy course policy, and then policy builder, and in here we have to use the policy builder and type allow any header, allow any method with origins, and with this origin that we have our React app, we'll use that. And then we have to type use course as the middleware. In that section, use course with the name of the course policy. As you see, we have our movies not found because in our API connector, we haven't specified also the API before the movies itself. So we have to go there. In our config.ts, have to /API. And now, as you see, we have our movies from our database. And when we press delete, as you see, we don't have this movie anymore. So our delete functionality works as expected so far. Now we have to deal with the routing in our React application in order to use properly the movie form when we are pressing the create button or we are pressing the edit button from our actions in the movie table. So we have to install one package in our React app. So I'll open the terminal and write npm install react-router-dom. And now in our routes.tsx file, we have to define those routes. So we'll write the export const routes will be the type of the CRUD objects. Equals. We have to import this from the React Router DOM package. And now, as the path will be a slash, it will be the element app component. And as the children, we have the following components. So the path, create movie. For that path, we'll have the element of the movie form as the key. As the key, we'll have the create. Those keys are actually very important because we're using the same component for two different routes. So as you see, this statement, once we have this path edit movie with the ID, we are using the same component movie form, and our router needs to have the different key in order to properly serve function. And as the path asterisk, we'll have the element of the movie table. And we have to export const router, and we'll use the create browser router to pass the routes. And now in our main.tsx file, we have to remove that app and type here router provider router is equal to router, and to import this, remove that app component, and we'll use that add import from React Router DOM. And now in our app.tsx file, we have to also use our router properly. So I'll use the location, write const location, use location as the hook, and now we'll use that condition if the location.pathname will be equal to slash, then we'll return the MovieTable component. If not, then we'll create the container as the class name, container style, and in here we'll have our outlet, and this outlet of course is from the React Router DOM, so it will handle for us all the routing. We'll also import the semantic-ui-react, and as you see, when we'll go to the create movie, then we are forwarded to the specific component as the movie form. And in here we have our movie table. And now, once we have our routing set up properly, we can use also our button to create movie to be directed to our movie form component. So we'll just change this button to be as navlink. As navlink, we have to import that navlink to the create movie. So it has to be compliant with our routes. We have the create movie there. Then in our movie table item as well, we have to change our button and also use this as navlink. So then we'll have this redirection to the specific component. As navlink from the React Router DOM to edit movie slash, have to use the $sign movie.id. Now, when we'll check this, when we press edit, then we are directed to the edit movie slash ID of 2. And when we create movie, then we are in the create movie as the blank component so far. Now we have to implement also the movie form in order to be redirected not to the empty component, but the filled one. So we can start with the getting the ID from the movie form in case that it will be redirected by the edit movie button. So we can access this ID by using the use params hook. We have to import this hook. And also we'll use later on the navigate as they use navigate hook. Also, we have to import this. And the first thing to do, we have to create also the use state hook of the movie DTO. So we have to write movie set movie function and use state of the type movie DTO. Import everything. Use state hook as well from the React. And now as the initial state, we have to type the default values for the specific properties of the movie DTO. So undefined will be the ID, title will be empty string, description as well, create date will be undefined, and also the category will be an empty string. Now we can write also the use effect hook. From React, we have to import this hook. And when this component will mount, then it will check if we have actually the ID from our params. If we have the ID in our params, then it means that we were redirected by the edit movie button. So we have already this ID and we can request our API connector and use this GetMovieByID function to pass the ID. And then when we'll get this movie from our API, then we'll set this movie. And then as the dependency, pass the ID. I see that we have one issue, that we are passing the movie ID as the number, so we have to change this movie ID to be the type of string, and anyway it will be converted properly in our API side. So if we have this ID, then we'll set this movie that was fetched from our API. We have to write as well the function to submit, because we'll have the two scenarios. We'll have the edit scenario and also create movie, so the brand new one scenario. So we'll create the function, and this function will be called handle submit. And in this function, we'll check if our movie ID will not be present, then we'll use API connector, create movie, we'll pass this movie that we have already in our component, and then navigate to our main page, so to our movie table. And the else statement, if we have this ID, then it means that we have to edit this movie. We'll pass the movie as the parameter, and then also use the navigate in order to be redirected to our main page. Now we can focus on the actual form. So in the return statement, we have to write segment. This segment is from the semantic-ui. Write the clearing, that it will clear out, and invert it as the color type. And inside of it, we will use the form also from the semantic-ui, and in onSubmit, we'll use the function handle submit. Autocomplete will be off, just in case, and the class name will be UI inverted form. And inside of it, we have to create 3 different fields. So the first one will be the form.input, and the placeholder will be called title, because we have to fill in the title of the movie, of the name title, and the value will be movie.title. The next form will be for the category. So the placeholder will be category with the name category, and the value be movie.category. And between those, we'll have the form.text area, because the description will be longer than the normal text input, and the placeholder will be called description, the name description, and in here we have the value equal to movie.description, and we'll have the button from the semantic-ui as well. that will be floated to the right. We'll write this as it is. It will be the positive type because we'll create now the submit button of the type submit, and the content will be submit, and then this button. Next one will be the cancel button, so we have to use the nav link as before. So the nav link from the React router DOM to the main page, and it will be floated right of the type button, so the normal one, and the content will be called cancel. Now we have to create the function that will actually react on the two kind of the events. So the HTML input element change event, and also the change event of the HTML text area element, because here we have the input and also the text area. So when we'll write something into the description field, it has to be reflected as well in this movie that we'll assign later on. So we have to create function called handle input change, and with the parameter we'll handle the change event from React, and it will be the HTML input element or HTML text area element. And in here we have to take the name and also the value from this event target. And then we can use our setMovie function from the hook just to take everything that we have in our current movie and change the value of the name, so the property as the value. So the name will be this name, so the title. So the MovieDto.title then will be changed for this value based on this change event. So then we have to use this on change to assign our function handle input change. And we can take this declaration and also use there and for the category as well. Now we can press the edit button, and as you see, everything was filled by our API call. Also this movie with all of those values, and also this movie with the A's as well. It's filled based on the API call. When we create the movie, as you see, we have everything that is blank. So we have the create movie. We have the create movie form type, and now we can just create one movie for us, movie 1, description 1, and the category cat 1, and we'll see if it will work. Yes, as we see, everything is now in our database. We can edit this movie as well. We can just change this for the movie 2, description 2, category 2. When we pressed submit, we were not redirected to our home page. So we have to handle this as well. Now we have to check why we have some sort of the not OK scenario here. When we are pressing the submit, as you see, the request failed with the status code 405 method not allowed. We have to make sure if we have everything correctly done. So based on the movie forum, we are navigating to the home page and edit movie. Probably something wrong with it. Yes, I see that we are not passing the ID into the URL. So we will use the $sign and take this movie ID. And this movie ID will be fetched from the movie.id. We'll check once again. As you see, we were redirected properly. So we'll edit one more movie, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, everything is fine. We don't have any more errors. So now we'll handle the exceptions with the usage of the axios interceptor that we have blank as the last file in our tutorial. Now, as the last thing to do, we have to handle also the errors that can occur in our API when we are performing some sort of the requests. So, as you remember, we have in our API the rule in the Fluent validation that the category cannot be longer than 30 characters. So when I click submit, as you see, I have the 400 bad request with the response, and then inside I have something like data, so the problem details, and also the errors and the property, and so on and so forth. So this is the very nested error message that we can, based on the response status code, display in the console. So we can deal with it. We can go to our axios interceptor and based on the status code, display everything properly. So we'll write export const setup error handling interceptor, and this interceptor will take the response from our API and based on that do something with it, and then it will forward it to the component. We have to do this once, so we have to set up this interceptor only once. So we'll use one variable. So is interceptor setup. It will be equal to false. And then after setting up the interceptor, we'll set this variable to true. So then our app component will not do this once again. We'll check if is interceptor setup. So when it's false, so only the first attempt, we'll use the axios. So we have to import this from the axios dot interceptors dot response dot use. And then on file field, so it will be the response, the type axios response. So we have to import this as well from the axios. Will be the response. And on rejected, it will be the error. And now, if we have something as the error dot response, then we can extract the status code from it. So it will be the error dot response dot status code and also the data of that error dot response data. And now we can use the switch statement based on the status code. And now when it will be the 400, so our Fluent validation checked our request and it was not fine, then if we have errors inside of the data, so as you remember, it was very nested inside, so we have those errors, and the errors as the reminder, as the errors we have assigned there in our problem details extensions, so validation errors. Then we can write the const model state errors will be equal to empty array, and then for every const item of data dot errors, so for each one of those we'll have to extract the property, so item property, and also the error message item dot error message. And then if we have the property and also we have the error message available, then and only then we are pushing to our empty array, so model state errors dot push, and it will be the property and error message. And then we are using the console.log to return the model state errors. After that, we have to use break. Next thing will be to handle the 401. So if it will be the 401, so then console.log, we can just display it unauthorized. Unauthorized, also the break. Then case 403. 403, it will be the forbidden, so console.log. Forbidden from our API. When it will be the 404, so we'll throw our not found exception, because then we'll return the status 404 not found. Then we will just display console.log found, and then as the default, we'll display that will be the generic error, so console.log generic error. And then we'll write return promise dot reject, and we'll pass the error. After that if statement, we have to assign the is interceptor setup variable to true, so then it will not be mounted once again. And this error handling interceptor then can be used in our app.tsx. So we'll use the useEffect hook from the React, so we have to import it, add import from React. And in this use effect hook, we can use set error handling interceptor. Now we can check how our exception handling interceptor will work like based on the specific status codes from our API. So I will just enrich this content of the category. I'll press submit, and as you see, we have this kind of structure that we fetched from our axios error, that we have the category, and category cannot be longer than 30 characters. You can use this kind of structure to display it as, for instance, the toasts here on the bottom or somewhere else. But in the API connector, as you remember, and as you see here even, that we are catching the error and we are throwing it, and we are console logging it actually. But since we have that exception handling interceptor, we don't have to do this once again. So we'll just remove those tries and catches and let our interceptor to return only what is essential for us. So I'll remove that try, that catch on as well, and I will return those movies from that get movies. We have to move all of those lines to the side, remove try catch from the create movie, from the edit movie as well. Now from the delete movie as well. Also from the GetMovieById, we can remove all of those lines that are not so useful. We can refresh it, clear the console, and we'll check that now we have only this kind of response. When we'll clean the console, I have changed some kind of the logic in our edit movie command handler to return NotFoundException when we actually found this movie. So I can show you that in update movie command handler, I changed this from if movie to update is null then to throw, but when it's not null. And we'll see when we'll have the proper content, we'll have the response not found. And when we'll change this from the not found exception to the, for instance, argument exception, we'll check if we'll have the general error, so it will be the internal server error. Now we'll press some new content. As you see, we have the internal server error and the generic error. So our exception handling interceptor works perfectly, and we can adjust this as it is needed on your own. So in that case, we are ready with our app. I'll just close this console. We can edit the movie, we can create the new one. We can create it, we can display it, we can delete those movies and edit those movies as well. Alright guys, so that's the end of this very long video. I hope that it was not too boring for you and not too complicated at all, because we went through a lot of different concepts of .NET Web API development and also the React together with TypeScript development. I wish you a very nice day. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and like button, and see you in the next video.